Hello and welcome to my project. My name is Dennis Becken. I will be covering the Mesquite solar array. This is a solar array in Maricopa County, Arlington, Arizona. This is an ambitious solar array. First and foremost, let's look at the budget for Sempra's Mesquite solar array project. There was an owner investment of $600 million along with a federal bank loan of $337 million. This was used, but it wasn't all used right away. For phase one, the capital expenditure was $399 million. Zachary Holdings designed this energy plant to make use of 800,000 solar panels, which were awarded to Suntech. These 800,000 solar panels were built on 85,000 steel piers. 1,000 of the 2,300 acres were covered with panels in phase one. Once we reached phase two, it expanded to 830,000 panels and more over time. Now that we've reached phase three, we have a total of 2.13 million panels. The module produced by Suntech is the multicrystalline silicon solar module. It's equipped with Pluto cell technology, which produces 280 watts per pound and has an efficiency of 20.3%. Other design characteristics are multiple 500 kilowatt inverters used, the fact that it's built next to the grid to reduce the need for batteries, and the fact that there's a control room inside of which engineers are able to adjust the tilt of solar modules and make other routine adjustments. As one of the first utility-scale projects to break the 100 megawatt barrier, there needs to be some specific design choices that will help to deal with this vast amount of energy that is going to be produced. So one design choice was the Advanced Energy AE500NX 500 kilowatt inverter that converts power without the need for water. This is very helpful in the desert, because obviously there's water scarcity. So they're able to have inverters that are liquid cooled without having to use water by converting air into water. There is consistently more than 400,000 megawatts after the initial phases prior to 2013. And after 2013, we had reached full production. And we are able to consistently get at or around or mainly above 400,000 megawatt hours in phase one, or for the phase one panels. So that's the importance of the graph in the top right. On the bottom left graph, we can see the changes between years. So there's November of 2010, then we have April of 2012, all the way up till October of 2021, all the way on the right. And you can see that each year has the different changes in levels of the megawatt hour production. So we can see that between years there's a big difference in the amount of megawatt hour production based on the seasons and because of other factors and weather in a certain year. So that's the significance of the bottom left graph. Then when you look at the bottom right graph, you can see in a more zoomed in way, if you will, the changes over a few months between a couple years. So when you look at the production in April or July, which are traditionally spring, summer, early summer, more warm months, we can see that there's higher production. And when we get to our Octobers, Novembers, Decembers, we have a lower production rate. And when we get back to May, more of the next year, traditionally warmer months, we have increasing production. 4 years after phase one production started, phase two production started, and it was able to fully kick into gear in 2017. And we were able to expect consistently over 250,000 more megawatt hours to add to the original megawatt hour production. This is evident in the first graph. Once we look at the second graph, we can see that just like the first phase, there are many different peaks and valleys to the production over a number of years. During winter months and colder months, there is a valley, and during warmer months, there is a peak. And as you can see in the bottom right graph, we have a more detailed look at a couple years. And we can see that during May, we have higher production, and during December, we have the lowest production on this graph. And June is also pretty high, and during March and the spring months, we have middle of the line production. And you can see that these fluctuations in the two charts are pretty evident. We have somewhere between 15,000 megawatt hours and slightly above 30,000 megawatt hours in the graph in the top right. And this is mirrored on the graph in the bottom right. You can see that it even drops a bit lower. This drop is also shown on the graph in the upper right, but it doesn't drop quite as low to 10,000 megawatts every year. The third production phase was a rather large production phase. There were, at the end of phase 3, now 2.13 million solar arrays that were part of the Mesquite solar array plant. As you can see in the graph on the top right, there was a consistent additional 450,000 megawatt hours that were added to the original 2 phases of production to create the entire number for the production for the entire plant. And in the bottom left, you can see over a few months for a couple of years, the early summer was up, and it was going down in November and December again, and coming back up in May, as was consistent with the numbers on previous phases. But you can see that the highest number and the lowest number for phase 3 are much larger than the highest and lowest number for phase 2, for example. And as you can see in the bottom right chart, we have our peaks and valleys again for a number of years. One may ask, what is the overall performance of the solar plant? Well, that's what this slide is for. So in this project, we got a lot of information from the U.S. Energy Information Administration, and one may ask, well, what if these numbers are faulty or incorrect? Well, we can look at the System Advisor model, which is a program that we use in the renewable energy field. And once we cross-check the numbers from the EIA, we were able to see that we have numbers that are in relatively the same ballpark. So we looked at the information from the EIA, and we got 1,133 gigawatt hours. And when we cross-checked that with SAM, we got 1,249 gigawatt hours. So this is within the margin of error. When you look at the total annual megawatt hour production or growth, you can see that in this chart there is a relatively flat line between 2013 and 2016, and then all of a sudden there's a huge jump around 2017. So this is because this is when phase 2 and phase 3 came online. And this 400,000 value for phase 1 is consistent with our numbers for phase 1. Looking at this slide, we can see that we have the performance ratings from December 2011 till today. It was expanded over time from 48 megawatts to 150 megawatts to 170 megawatts, and now 400 megawatts. And that's in terms of AC rating. When we look at the DC rating, now today we are at 580 megawatts. And we could also go through and find the DC rating for each of those, but basically you just multiply it by the DC AC rating. And our DC AC rating here is 1.45, which is kind of crazy, but because this is such an expansive set, because we have so many high volume inverters, and because we have a setup that is so close to the grid within a transmission grid corridor, and having no need for additional transmission infrastructure, we have a setup that is not your average setup. So that explains why this is such a wild DC-AC rating. But again, the eventual goal is to reach 700 megawatts, and when it's finished, it will be the largest solar array in North America. Our capacity factor in this case is unbelievable. We have a capacity factor of 32.33%. which is twice the capacity factor of the solar array given to us an example on Lab 6 or Professor Shapiro's rooftop solar array. We also have an effective hour of 7.76 hours per day. This is relatively standard and wouldn't change much for many arrays. Last but not least, we will look at the economic performance of the Mesquite solar array. Pacific Gas and Electric Company entered a 20-year-long power purchasing agreement with Sempra, and this began in Mesquite Phase 1. The estimated earnings, just looking at Phase 1 and looking at conservative production estimates from power.gov, we can see that looking at the going rate of 15 cents per kilowatt hour in Arizona, they would be making $4,309,928 just from the first phase. And then if you look at the total production is 1,133 gigawatt hours and $1,500 per gigawatt hour. We're looking at $1,699,500 per hour and $4,813,664,000 per year. But this is not taking into account all the power necessary to run this, losing money with the production of it, the construction of it. There were 500 workers that were out there in the peak production of Phase 1. And they created a lot of jobs, but they also had to pay all these workers. They have to pay the lead engineer, the supplier of the solar panels, and it's an ever-expanding set, so it's a good chance that a lot of this money that they're making are going to the costs of running the company and also going to the expansion of the solar panels.